Hi everyone, this is William from the Headphone Experience. I'm here tonight with my first impressions of the Hi-Fi Audio ZEN CAN Signature, and this is the HFM edition, and there are a couple different versions of this, and I will explain that in a few minutes what the different versions are. This was loaned to me by Hi-Fi Audio for review. It currently sells for $299 US. This is a headphone amp only, similar to the ZEN CAN. It's basically a deluxe version of the ZEN CAN. It does not have a built-in DAC like the ZEN DAC did, which was a combination of a DAC and amp. So anyway, this is a dual mono balanced design, and it has three analog inputs. The first would be an RCA single-ended, the second would be a 3.5 millimeter single-ended, and then a 4.4 millimeter balanced input, and these are all three on the rear of the unit. It has two headphone outputs, a 6.3 millimeter single-ended headphone out and a 4.4 millimeter balanced headphone output, which are both on the front, and then it has another 4.4 millimeter balanced output on the rear of the unit if you want to hook it up to another amp. It has four gain settings, and that would be 0, 6, 12, and 18 decibels of gain. The power rating on this, according to Hi-Fi, into 32 ohms is 1200 milliwatts from the balanced output and 1600 milliwatts from the single-ended output, which is a little unusual, having a higher output from the single-ended output. But as you get into a higher impedance, into 64 ohms, it puts out 1890 milliwatts from the balanced output and only 870 milliwatts from the single-ended. And the higher the impedance of the headphone, the larger the difference is between the output of the single-ended and the balanced output. The balanced output puts out the higher output. So Hi-Fi claims a signal-to-noise ratio of 121 decibels and a total harmonic distortion of 0.006%. This unit is 6.2 inches wide, it's 4.6 inches deep, and it's about 1.4 inches tall and weighs 1.21 pounds. I'll wait a minute on this. I was going to show you it, but I wanted to mention a couple of the other features first. The HFM in the name of this, that stands for Hi-Fi Man. And what this has is it has a built-in EQ that is made specifically for Hi-Fi Man headphones. And most of the Hi-Fi Man headphones, I've listened to quite a few, have a pretty similar tone balance. And so it's kind of a middle of the road. I think it was aimed specifically at the drop 4XX version, but I've tried it with a couple of different Hi-Fi Man headphones and it seems to work real well. What it basically does is it gives it a little bit of boost in the sub bass, actually a pretty substantial boost in the sub bass, a small boost in the mid bass, and then it sounds to me like there's a little bit of a boost in the upper mids. It seems to move the upper mids a little bit more forward and emphasize them just a little bit more, bring them out a little bit. But it's subtle, it's not a real drastic difference, but it is noticeable. And with the Hi-Fi Man headphones I tried, with the cheaper ones, the lower price, the HE400 SC for example, it did seem to make an improvement in my opinion. This also has what's called XSpace, which is supposed to simulate listening to speakers instead of a headphone. It's supposed to bring the sound out of your head. Hi-Fi describes it as actually making the soundstage wider. In my opinion, that's not really the case. To me, it sounds like the soundstage actually gets slightly narrower, but it moves the sound further out in front of me, so it sounds more distant than, instead of the sound being, like right in my face or right in my head, it sounds like it's further out in front. So in that respect, it does seem to simulate speakers a little more, but I'm not really picking up on the extra width. But to me, headphones sound wider, the sound stage, than speakers do, unless you're almost in between the speakers. If you have the speakers at, like a triangle away from you, the sound stage seems narrower than it does with headphones. So actually, I think it does a pretty good job of simulating the sound of speakers instead of a headphone, but it doesn't do what they say it does and make the sound stage wider. But that's just my experience. I can't, everyone's going to be different. It depends on your hearing, your ears, it depends on a lot of things. So anyway, this unit comes with a 5-volt external power supply, unlike the ZEN DAC, which uses just the power coming from the USB output of your computer or whatever. The ZEN CAN and the ZEN CAN Signature both have an external 5-volt power supply. The one that comes with this, I think, is a more deluxe version. I don't have it handy, or I would show it to you. It's down behind my desk plugged in. This unit also comes with an RCA cable. It's pretty basic, but it seems to be decent quality. It's about 18 inches long, and this allows you to connect the DAC to the amp, with the RCA single-ended connections, and it's long enough that you can either stack them on top of each other or put the DAC on one side, the amp on the other, or vice versa. It will reach either way. I did want to show you, though, that iFi, when they sent the two of them. You can see in the picture behind me, I've got the Signature 1 DAC, and actually, what would it be called? It's called the ZEN 1 Signature DAC. And this unit they sent together, and you can see the two stacked behind me, and they did send me this cable. This cable does not come with either unit. It is optional. This is a 4.4 millimeter to 4.4 millimeter to run between the DAC and the amp to send a balanced signal to the amp. And this is I think this goes for about $69 through iFi right now. So testing this unit, so far all my testing has been done with the stack that you see in the background, the ZEN 1 Signature DAC and the ZEN CAN Signature HFM. So far the two have just, I've used them together, and I've tried them with a few different headphones, actually some pretty high-end headphones for, this isn't a budget unit, but it's sort of a mid-priced, mid-fi unit, but I try to test everything with pretty high-end headphones if I have them available, because that's going to give me a better, ability to hear if there are any problems, any flaws or whatever. So anyway, so far I've listened to this with the ZMF Atrium, which I'm currently working on my full review of that, and trying to put some time in and be real thorough with that. So I have done a lot of listening with that headphone, with this amp and other amps lately, and so probably more than any other headphone that I've used with this so far would be the ZMF Atrium, which in my opinion is an incredible headphone. It's definitely one of the best headphones I've heard so far. And I've also got the Hi-Fi Man Aria. This is the version 3, which is the stealth version. I've done some listening with that, and I did want to mention that I do have a cable for the ZMF and the Hi-Fi Man to use them both from the balanced output of this. So I have the listening I have done has been from the balanced output, and then I also, as a power test, to test the ability of this amp to put out power for enough for a hard to drive headphone. I use the Hi-Fi Man HE400 SE, which I just reviewed about a month ago. And it's a great little headphone. I love it. It's my new budget recommendation. It's a fantastic sounding headphone for the price. I think you can get it for $109 right now. Excuse me just a second. But anyway, but that headphone does have one drawback. It takes some serious power to drive it. It's actually quite a bit harder to drive than the Hi-Fi Man Sundara, which is pretty well known as needing a pretty serious amp. So I would say the HE400 probably needs twice the power that the Sundara does, and probably as much or more power than the versions 1 or 2 of the Arias. So anyway, I tried that, and I actually, because that's a low impedance headphone, 18 ohms, I actually used it from the single-ended output because this amp puts out more power into low impedance headphones from the single-ended output, and this actually did a very good job of driving that. I plugged it in, or I had the gain control up to the highest level. I did go to the 4th level, and it did a decent job on the 3rd level, which would be 12 decibels of gain. But when I went up to the 18 decibels, the volume knob, I only had it at about 10 o'clock, and it was playing plenty loud. And the big giveaway with the HE400 SE, if it's getting enough power, is if it is getting sufficient power, the bass is solid and tight and has some impact to it. If it's underpowered, the bass almost disappears on that headphone, and it sounds loose and muddy and just has no dynamics to it. So that headphone is great for testing the power output of an amp. It just sounds completely different if it's underpowered or getting sufficient power. And like I said, that's probably the second hardest headphone I have to drive, and the hardest would probably be the HE560 because I think that's 50 ohms and it's also inefficient. So, and I haven't had a chance to try this with that yet, but I will do that before I put out my full review on this. Some of the other things I want to do is I want to compare this to some other amps, and I want to try more headphones. And I like to try several headphones with every amp that I review because not every headphone and amp match up well together. Sometimes it's just not a real good combination. Sometimes it's a great combination. But I've sometimes seen reviews of, say, a headphone amp that doesn't review that well, but they only tried it with one headphone, and it might have been a mismatch. Or same thing with the headphone. Someone might review a headphone and not match it up with the right amp and not hear that headphone at its best. So I try every amp with several headphones, every headphone with at least a few different amps, and get a pretty good idea, before I put out a full review. So anyway, like I said earlier, this is just my first impressions. I've got, several hours in on this, but I haven't really done any comparisons yet, like I said, to any other amps or anything like that. And I've said this before in several of my reviews that I would say my ears adjust pretty quickly, but it's probably my brain that's actually doing the adjustment, where I'll listen to a new piece of equipment, whether it's a headphone or an amp or whatever it is, and within a few minutes my ears or my brain adjust to the point where it sounds right. And I might not notice a flaw or something weird about it until I compare it directly with one of my references. But I try not to do that before I do my first impressions. My first impressions videos are usually what I'm hearing before I actually compare it to something else. And then my full reviews, I actually go in and compare it to the best amp or best headphone or whatever in a similar price range, and then base my opinions on that. So right now, at the point of not comparing this to anything else yet, my first impressions of the sound is It has very good, actually outstanding clarity and detail. Just sounds very, very clean. I did a very brief comparison to just the ZEN DAC alone, and that was like, I think it's the original model, which was like $129, so it's not really a fair comparison. $129 to almost, what, about $630 for this combination. And this is definitely a step up. And that's where I notice it most, in the clarity and detail. This is a definite step up. And that's not taking away from the ZEN DAC, because I actually rated that my best budget combination amp DAC of the year last year, I think 2 years in a row. So I really like the ZEN DAC. In fact, that's why I still have it, because I bought it from hi-fi instead of sending it back, because I really did like it. But this is a step up. If you have a ZEN DAC, this combination takes you up to another level. In my opinion, the ZEN DAC is adequate for headphones up to, like $300, maybe $500. It does a pretty good job with the Hi-Fi Man Edition XS. But this is definitely a level up. In my opinion, this amp and DAC combination does a good job with headphones up, like to the $2,000 price range. The Hi-Fi Man Aria, that's like a $1,600 headphone, and actually the ZMF Atrium does a real good job with that. I'm not saying that it takes that headphone to its limits like some more expensive amps, but it's sufficient. It does a pretty good job with that headphone. You're not going to be disappointed. It's not like if you plug the ZMF Atrium into this, you're not going to just immediately be disappointed and say, well, this doesn't compare to my high-end amp or something. I mean, like I said, this isn't going to bring out 100% of what the Atrium can do, but it brings out probably 90%. So, like I said, this is a sufficient. I'm using it as a desktop amp right now, and before I do my full review, because this DAC does have coax and optical inputs, I will plug it into my main system and compare it to some other DACs and amps, some higher priced items, and see how it holds up against those. So anyway, I kind of went off on a side, I guess what do you call it, segued off into, got kind of lost there, but I did want to come back to the sound. So anyway, another thing I noticed about this, it has a large soundstage, a nice width, pretty decent depth, pretty good layering, and very good separation of the different instruments and sounds. So sound-wise, like I said, I've got a few hours on this, but haven't done any significant critical listening yet, so I will do that and try to get back to you in a few weeks, but more likely it's going to be more like a month, because it is my busy season with my daytime job. So so sound-wise, yeah, I'm really impressed with this so far. It sounds really good. And it also has enough power to power, the Hi-Fi Man HE400 SE. It did a real good job with that, so I don't think power is going to be an issue for maybe a few headphones out there. I mean, I don't have the Hi-Fi Man HE6, which is probably the hardest to drive, or the Abyss or something like that are known to really need a lot of power. But the Hi-Fi Man HE560 is, and I will test it with that before I do my full review, is the hardest headphone to drive that I've reviewed so far in 3.5 years of reviewing. So that's going to cover, if it can handle that headphone, it's going to cover most headphones. And I didn't mention that the ZMF Atrium is also, it's a 300 ohm headphone. So this does real well with high impedance headphones. I believe I was only on the second gain setting of 6 decibels when I was using that. In fact, I'm almost deafened. So the 300 ohm headphone was not a problem at all for this amp. So the HFM part of this, the equalization, like I said, it gives a pretty good boost to the sub bass, a little bit of boost to the mid bass, and messes around with the mids and trebles a little bit. But anyway, with the HE400 SE, it actually, I thought it improved the sound. It did sound good. It did give it more weight to the sub bass. The Aria version 3 stealth version, I didn't really think it was necessary, because that headphone, as far as I'm concerned, has perfect tone balance. I don't think there's another headphone out there that I've heard that I could say has better tone balance than the Stealth Aria. So not necessary in my opinion. I can't really tell. It did give it a little bit more sub bass, which it doesn't really need, but you know, in some circumstances that could be a benefit. It could sound good. So anyway, I guess I'm going to wrap this up now. I'm going to come back in a couple weeks, probably more like a month, and dig a little deeper into the sound and try this with a few more headphones, see how it works out, and also try to compare it with to a couple of higher end amps. I've got a new amp coming in tomorrow. I've got some tube amps here. I've got my Audio GD Master 9, and which is kind of my reference amp, and I'm curious to see how it sounds compared to some of these more expensive amps. But so far it seems like a really nice amp DAC combination, and seems adequate for all but, you know, maybe the highest end headphones, and I'm real happy with it so far and enjoying doing a review of it. So I'll get back to you in a couple weeks. Once again, this is William from the Headphone Experience. If this video has helped you, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. And the Headphone Experience on Facebook is up to over 16.4 thousand members. You're all welcome to join us over there. Once again, thanks for watching my video.